Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Salmons, Research Community Manager for Sage Method Space, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Narelle Lemon, and we'll have a conversation about kindness and collaboration. But before we get started, if you are new to Method Space, this is a blog sponsored by Sage Publishing. We're interested in all things to do with designing, planning, conducting, analyzing research, writing about our results, and sharing them in all different kinds of ways. And you can see at the center of this Venn diagram, we have teaching and learning, because we think that whether you are a brand new researcher or an experienced researcher, we all have something to learn. So Narelle, why don't you begin by introducing yourself?
Thanks, Janet. So nice to be here. Hi, everyone. My name's Narelle Lemon. I'm an associate professor in education and also an associate dean education in the School of Social Sciences, Media, Film and Education at Swinburne University Technology, located in Melbourne, Australia. Janet and I have a lovely collaboration and relationship over a number of years. So it's so great to come together and talk about this. And I suppose what's underpinning this is I have an incredibly large passion for self-care and well-being. For us as researchers, as academics, as emerging scholars, but also in life. As well. So it's nice to be able to bring some of those aspects and talk about some of those aspects today in relation to collaboration.
Right, because whether we're in person or on the other side of the screen, there are people involved, no matter what the scale of the collaboration might be. So we certainly had a unique experience because we were collaborating on a book about collaboration. And when we started this, we did not know each other. We were introduced and invited to write this book together. And that, I think, kind of brings me to beginning by thinking like, well, depending on how many kind of variables and factors you have in your partnership, the size of the partnership and the nature of the partnership, the more attention we need to make to process. And we were very conscious of the fact that, we wanted to model the process we hoped others would adopt. So beginning with this first one, voluntary versus assigned, the fact that we did not know each other when we started out meant that it was valuable to take the time to get acquainted and to find out not only what our previous work was on this topic of collaboration, where we're coming from, what we, think about it, but also, to get acquainted a little bit, and find out, who are you? How might I approach working with you? Is this something I even want to do? And so that, I think really informed the beginning of our conversations.
Yeah, most definitely. And what I loved is that we spent the time to get to know each other as people as well as our work. So it was kind of the both perspectives, thinking holistically. And I think what investing in that time enabled us to answer those questions. Well, okay, we've both been approached by colleagues who know us, but what does that mean for Janet and Narelle coming together and thinking through that? And it's moving through the I'm humbled that someone thought we could work together. What perspective are they linking us together with? But then what does that mean for us as well? And I think, what I really loved when we're thinking about beginning the collaboration together was we did something that often doesn't happen in the world of research and higher education, is we actually invested in quite a bit of time over a length of time to get to know each other, to talk through well, what does collaboration mean to you? What have your experiences been? We come from different disciplines as well, so we had different lenses in terms of that. And obviously, we're from two different countries. That brings in another influence. But also things there where we found similarities, like we both are creative, and creativity is very, very important to both of us. And so we invested in time to find out, well, what does that mean? So we kind of looked at assumptions as well of, oh, okay, on the surface, you could say we're both creative. We have arts practices, but how we put them into place is different. Our experiences them with different. So it's investing in that time to go, okay, what's the shared understanding? What's the shared language, coming together to embrace different perspectives, the differences that we bring, but then how does that come together to make a united way of working and thinking?
Right. And I think some people might feel like, well, kind of, let's get going. Let's get going. Like, I'm busy. Don't waste my time. Let's get on with it.
Yeah.
But in fact, the time spent with that relationship building, especially for a large and complicated project that is going to go over a period of time and have a variety of stages, not only internally within the collaboration, but then externally with editors and other people who copy editing and all of the processes you go through to publish a book. So if we were not on the same page, so to speak, that would become even more difficult later on. So all of that kind of what we're describing of getting acquainted, I think part of it is personal trust and trust about style and approach and how we're going to, the logistics of how you're going to work together in terms of, I mean, luckily, even though we have very different time zones, our technology access of one of these other things noted, we both have, that digital literacy and access to the same tools. So, that was not something that we would have to negotiate. But, the more factors like that you have, the more important it is to take the time to build your process. But one other piece that I think is equally as important as the sort of more personal trust is also, thinking about, say, especially when you're coming together with people who have already work underway on this topic. There's a certain amount of thinking like, well, wait a minute. Do I want my stuff blended with her stuff? Will it fit together, on a practical level? But also, am I willing to relinquish some of the the me, for the we? And that, that is a real as we get into something that is this kind of deeply what we would call synergistic, where you're really melding things. It's not just a matter of saying like, okay, you write this chapter and I'll write that chapter, and then we'll put the whole thing together into a book. It's like we co-wrote the whole thing. So even though there are parts where we might have taken the lead, we wanted that kind of project where, we were going to co-mingle our ideas, but to do that, you really need to think about whether that, how you, it's not only how you think about it in terms of the coherence of the ideas, but how you feel about it and you kind of the integrity of your own work and how you feel about that.
Yeah, totally. And that's great points, because it becomes the I to we, and what is the we, and that can be very, very challenging when you're working in this space. And I think, two things come to mind for me about these points is there's the past lived experiences and what you bring, and they can be the positives and the negatives, when you've been burnt, versus something that's a collaboration that's worked really, really well. And so investing in the time to know, have that self-awareness about yourself and what are you bringing. And I think the other aspect is being open as well to other perspectives and the gifts that can come with someone else's thinking as well. And as you shift towards the we, how your thinking can bounce off one another to create something new, a legacy to the area that you're writing about. And so that co-design that comes with it. And I think that's it's like one of the sweet spots of collaboration. When you come to the openness to allow that to occur. And that certainly happened for us, and it wasn't quick, but we invested in the time and we respected each other's work in order for us to move to the we stage.
And two points that I would just to highlight from what you're saying. I mean, one is to be self-aware enough not only about the things like personal style and like, well, what really bugs me, if there's something, if you're the kind of person who's thinking like, hey, if I didn't hear back from the other person, with my email, within 24 hours, like I'm not going to be happy, whatever those personal style things might be, but more in terms of, again, when you're talking about people who have already developed work in an area, what is the part of that I say, I'm not flexible about this part, like this part, I spent a lot of time developing this, the integrity of this piece of the work, I want to stand. This part of it, I'm open to, so being kind of aware, like, where are your boundaries of like, I'm going to be touchy when it comes to this point. And I'm not saying I'll never change it, but this is something that, I've got some attachment to, and this is a part that I'm open to change. So there's a lot of, self-awareness. And when we say taking time, it's not that we, in our case, encountered resistance on either of our part, but just that it takes some time to become familiar with the other person's work in this, whatever the topic might be. And, so that you can start to see like, okay, here's how, I can see how this piece complements this piece in my work. That's going to take some time. But again, we keep coming back to this thing of time because we know that, everyone is under time pressures. But if you are planning a collaborative project, and you're trying to come up with your timeline, be realistic about, not only, that some time will be involved, but, what are some of the activities that you need to do during that time that are going to put you on solid ground to carry out the rest of it.
And it's honoring time as well, but with a openness and respect to what that means. And I say that in terms of, deep thinking is one of the beautiful gifts that we have when we work as researchers, but it's also one of the things that we so want, and we want more of it. So it's actually planning for the deep thinking time as well, to honor that, to come through, to negotiate what that means for you, for your thinking, for the thinking as you process where you're heading with your ideas, with how you're approaching the collaboration, and really thinking through and honoring, well, what does that look like when we are collaborating together? There's some moments where it might work fast, and I know I've had moments where the ideas are generating and you're bouncing off them, and you can continue a dialogue, whether it's via the email or it's through some sort of other platform. Other times it's like, oh, we've got another meeting. Can we schedule another one in? I just, I've had an idea about this. And then there's other times where it's like, actually, I need time to process. I'm not quite there yet.
So or I have other pressures, other deadlines, especially when you're working on a very large project. One of the things that we, in going through this, as we say, getting acquainted process, both personally and kind of on the more scholarly side, was finding that we shared a perspective on collaboration as being positive and feeling like collaboration has gotten a bad name. People have had, difficult time. They've got bad stories about, when it went wrong, and feeling that it's not collaboration that was wrong or that that failed. It was that perhaps understanding the process and following, coming to agreements, talking about expectations, and some of those kinds of things that are often neglected because people are just trying to, like, let's get on with this. We're really, what was at play, rather than, the value of really working together as collaboratively. Certainly not every task is meant to be or is ideally completed in a collaborative manner, but certainly, there's incredible value. And the fact that we both shared that, from the beginning, once we started to look at each other's work, then we could say that's going to be a central theme of our work together. Really putting this forward as, you can do this, you can learn how to do this, even if you've had bad experiences, this is something you can learn how to do. It's not like it's not magic that just poof, it happens, but it's also not something that's insurmountable.
Totally. You can totally learn how to collaborate. You can totally craft the experience of collaboration. And I think, that awareness aspect comes into it as well, and the self-awareness, but also awareness of others. And I always think, we can always learn something from others. So we could sometimes make an initial judgment call where it's like, I don't want to collaborate with that person because I've heard X, Y, and Z. And there are some people that have sustained practices that you probably do want to avoid. And so not having the toxic positivity here in terms of collaborate with everybody. There are, people that it's best to avoid and give a wide berth when you have the choice. Everybody who comes into our life, the opportunity with collaboration, whether it's a choice or it's not, we have something to learn from them. And that helps us as we continue to move through as well. When you have those beautiful collaborations that come together and you grow together, then they're really magical moments of learning, how do I come to a collaboration, and how do my colleagues come to a collaboration? And what comes from that in terms of your growth cognitively and emotionally and personally as well.
Well, one of the pieces that you introduced was this circle of niceness. And I know there are people who are going to see this and go like, oh, please, this is just much too touchy-feely. But truly, the more that I have, worked with all kinds of other collaborative projects besides the one that we did together, just thinking, as we work remotely much of the time, and where those distance and complicating factors are nearly always present to some degree, that these characteristics can really help to kind of smooth the rough edges. So why don't you just talk to us a little bit about this circle?
Yeah, no problems. The circle of niceness was first coined by some of my closest colleagues here in Australia, with Rachel Pitt, Inga Newburn, and Stuart Palmer. And it was back in 2013. And they were talking about collaboration and, different aspects that come together that make some collaborations just sing and others not. And the work that we've carried out further is in Whisper Collective and with other colleagues, as a part of that, we've sort of developed and grown Circle of Niceness. And so to be able to share that and the extension of that work in our book has been really exciting. And I think what really underpins a Circle of Niceness is bringing your best self and finding your best self with others. And it's about really being, you know, how are we honest with each other? How do we form trust? How do we form that community? How do we work with each other? And that really that there's such a mutual respect underpinning the whole collaboration aspect. And yes, niceness can, you know, trigger people with various different responses, but you know, we're thinking about how do we appreciate each other? How are we kind? How do we support one another? How do we approach working with each other in a way that has a mutual respect, that we're always learning with and from each other, through the process of collaborations, however small or big they are. And there's so many aspects to it, in terms of the best self that you bring, but those learning moments as well, where you are challenged. We're always challenged when we're working with other people, because other perspectives, other lived experiences are coming into the mix. And so Circle of Niceness is a really nice way to start to think about, well, how do I approach collaborations? Who do I want to collaborate with, and how do we sustain them in a way that supports us with that mutual respect, with a kindness, with a humility, with a legacy that keeps passing on, you know, best practice, ideal practice in terms of how we work with each other. And it's kind of a little bit of an interrupter to those not so nice colleagues as well.
Right. And certainly, you know, not every one of these things is necessarily going to be present. I mean, with some people, you know, we will have less collegiality or enjoyment, partly because, you know, maybe we aren't in the same place. The project is time limited. You know, that's not necessarily going to be a part of it. But having just, you know, this kind of thought in mind of saying, well, yes, I'm feeling really pressured, and I really wish that the other person would like get off the, you know, the delay and get moving with this thing, or you know, whatever the aggravation might be, to just step back and say, you know, wait a minute, you know, let's, you know, the priority is that we're going to come out of this with, you know, the outcome we want to deliver, whether it's a book or an article or a presentation or whatever the collaborative project might be, a service project, field project. So, you know, to really look at this and say, well, which of these things is important to me, that I'm going to feel like, yeah, I can bring my best to this, and you know, where are the places that cause me friction or tension, and I've got to air those and make sure that the expectations and the understandings are clear. Again, especially when you're working on a large, complex, multi-stage project where, you know, it's going to, you know, it's going to take some time, and we need to, you know, develop it as it goes. Then that kind of friction can just, you know, hold you back from really being, you know, at your best. So you've been involved with quite a complicated collaboration with a series of books, not just one book, but a whole series of books. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you have worked with all of these different people to succeed with that process?
Yeah, it's so true. So I'm the series editor, and I've got the first 4 books here. It's like a bundle to hold up,
Yes.
but the you know, a series on well-being and self-care in higher education and finding proactive solutions has been a wonderful book series that I proposed a couple of years ago now, right before the pandemic, and it's been a project that's been just a gift throughout the pandemic. So we have 10 books at various different stages in the book series at the moment. The first 4 are out, and there's a number that are in press at the moment. We're about to sign off on the final final manuscripts and others that are at various different stages of about to be reviewed, contracts coming through as well. But one of the big things about this project is it's collaborating with scholars, early career researchers, emerging scholars, PhD students, experienced researchers, academics in the field who write and talk about well-being and self-care in a way that calls out different situations, but then talks about how we move forward. And so the proactive aspect is really key to help us navigate, that big, huge topic of well-being in higher education. One of the lovely things about the book series is that I get to work with so many different people all over the world coming together, whether I've edited the books or other people are editing and writing, and being able to facilitate those voices coming through means that, at the moment there's over 100 authors involved globally from various different career stages, talking about and sharing their experiences and how they're problem solving and moving forward. And the biggest thing that I love about this project is that over 30% of the authors are first-time authors. So what comes for that has been setting an intention that this book series also enables emerging scholars to be a part of a collaboration that is a circle of niceness, that we go through an experience right from proposing what a chapter might be, to seeking feedback, to being a part of a really positive experience that's a learning experience of how to write, how to approach a genre of writing a book chapter, how to work with others, how to provide feedback to other authors, how to respond to proofs, how to move your thinking forward.
Right.
And so we've been able to really, form this beautiful community, a beautiful collaboration over a number of books that's really had that strong through line of we're helping each other grow with our writing, and in some respects and in many respects grow also on the topic of well-being as well.
So, I mean, just listening to you talk about with this project, well, then if I were looking at this circle of niceness and thinking, well, what's important in this particular kind of project? Well, because you've got a lot of new people, that mentoring and support elements are important, because for a lot of these people, this initial experience is going to shape how they view contributing to books in the future. I know that, for myself personally, one of the initial experiences that I had of contributing to a book was with an editor who was really good at that. And, it was such a positive experience that, that helped me then when I took on being in the role of an editor myself for a collection. I knew what I'd been on the other side of the table, so I knew how valuable, that was. And, certainly, some of the, kindness piece goes into it, of just, understanding that, maybe, that for this first time author, they're nervous about this, they're on edge about this, and that even though we may not think that we are, in, like, we're certainly not authority figure types, but to someone who is brand new and they look at, wow, you've published all these books, you're an expert in this field, I am the humble student, and like, this is scary. And so, some of the kinds of things like the compassion, making the time, being helpful, would be important. Whereas with a different project where everyone was, say, in the very experienced level, maybe you would be drawing on a different selection of the of this circle to make that kind of project work, whereas there, if everyone's on a more, kind of say more equal playing field, then maybe, it's more of a collegiality, where, I mean, one of the books that I edited, I had a situation like that where everyone was on a similar, kind of level as experienced researchers. And so I set up within the book a kind of a commentary process. So people would comment on another person's chapter, and that was included within the book, to give some sense of critique and dialogue and help to get the discussion going that I hoped would, continue with the reader. But you wouldn't probably introduce that kind of concept where you have a lot of people who are at a more beginning stage, or where you have a more uneven levels of experience within your pool of contributors.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because it's thinking through also what is the collaboration, who are your collaborators, and what's most important. So I think that raises a great point as well, in terms of, there's a set of best practices, but some of them will be weighted more heavily with some collaborations versus others, depending on, the structure of the collaboration as well. And I think, for this particular collaboration, because there's a mixture between emerging scholars, first time writing in this style, more experienced writers, but also paired with the topic that we're writing about. We're writing in first person, it's narrative,
Right,
we're talking about our well-being. There's a trust and a humility that needs to be present, with compassion and self-compassion as well. And you're honoring in a collaboration such as this, that there's going to be multiple conversations occurring with individuals and collectives over a sustained period of time, as thinking occurs in terms of, is this okay? Can I check in? Can I just share you a paragraph now that I'm writing? Or can I share you my rough draft now before it's officially due to go out to review? And as an editor, being responsive to that and establishing that, yes, totally, this is something that we will do in this collaboration to support you. Whereas other collaborations, and depending on the topic, that may not be required. So it's tuning into that wheel of circle of niceness in some ways, in terms of, what am I cultivating in our community in this collaboration at the time? And there'll be moments where everything is present, and other moments where some things are, we have a heavily weighted towards, because it needs to be there to support that personal and professional growth.
Right. And I think, as you mentioned, the subject matter, that's certainly another factor. If we're dealing with something that's very, cut and dried, and, maybe it's, the measures of growth over the last X number of years, or, something that's just very fact-based, and, that would be handled much differently, where there, we want to make sure we have accuracy and we've covered all of the information, but it's not like this is something that is a personal matter, a sensitive topic that the people involved, are close to and feel very vulnerable about. So, these are all things. And I think what we try to describe in our book is how to evaluate, all of these kinds of questions, and build a collaborative process that will work based on the people, the circumstances, the differences, the characteristics of the and length of the project, the scope of the project, etc.
Yeah, totally. And I think the work that we've done together, we think through high performing collaborations and teams, right through to you're setting it up and establishing it for the first time, right through to those areas where we're a bit dysfunctional and things are not happening so well. We've gone a bit pear-shaped. How can we bring it back? Is it possible to bring it back as well? And so there's a thinking through, I suppose, with collaborations as well, that you do have to invest time in them. They don't just happen. And really, I've used this word a lot, but it is tuning in and that awareness around what's happening with this collaboration. What are we bringing? What are the assumptions? What are the expectations? Where are we heading? When do we need to pause and reevaluate? When do we need to celebrate and appreciate as well? And when do we appreciate each other? It's recently had a conversation with somebody about, we got to the end of a collaboration project. It was done, it was sent off, and it was just silence. And it was like, whoa, we haven't taken time to say, hey, I learned this, or I appreciate this, or let's celebrate the fact that we hit submit. We're moving, fast paced all the time. So it's kind of interrupting things like that when we're thinking about collaborations and circle of nicenesses. Everyone wants and does love and appreciation, and especially when it comes from an authentic space. And it's, thinking about those aspects as well.
Right. Yeah, it's really kind of a whole culture to the process. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with me a little bit about this. And I hope that our method space readers who are either, thinking about embarking on a collaborative project, especially large scale writing project, or, research project, will find this useful, and, will help them to, have a positive experience.